You are live.
All right. So today, T session 11 is going to be about power supplies, and we're going to be able to identify the characteristics of power supplies and its connectors. We'll be able to select a power supply based on given specifications. We'll be able to describe how to remove and install a power supply, and we should be able to identify common problems that come up with power supplies and how to address them. Our key BSMs to keep in mind for today's technical session are communication and keeping a growth mindset. Okay. All right, so power supplies deal with electricity, so we need to have a basic understanding of electricity. So electricity is basically a flow of electrons, and electrons are a particle, a very small particle that are negatively charged. They circle the nucleus of an atom. We don't need to go into all that. The pressure of electrons in a wire is called its voltage, and it's measured in volts. So when you see volts, that is a measurement of the pressure of electrons inside of a wire. The amount of electrons moving on a wire is called the current, and this is measured in amperes. Amperes. I might have mispronounced that, but that is how it's measured. The amount of electrical power is called wattage and is measured in watts. And wattage equals volts times amperage. So W equals V times A. Okay. And wires have a resistance that restrict the amount of electrons that could flow through them. And this is measured in ohms. And it looks like an horseshoe, kind of.
It's the omega symbol.
That's what I thought it was, and I didn't want to be wrong, but yeah, thank you. The omega symbol, thanks. So these are key. This is probably a good slide to take a screenshot of, so you can remember the definitions for all these terms. Okay. All right. So there's two ways. Yes, say that.
Come on.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Who said something?
Could you show us the other slide again, please?
Of course, I can go back. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me know when you're ready for me to move on. Can I move on now? Are you still copying?
Yeah, it's a good picture.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Okay, so electricity flows in two ways, right? We have alternating current, which means that the current oscillates between negative and positive voltage. So an alternating current travels on a hot line from a power station, then the current returns to the power station on a neutral line. The neutral line is grounded to prevent an uncontrolled electricity in a short. So the standard alternating current in the United States comes in somewhere between 110 volts to 120 volts. So we usually write around 115 volts. And in Europe, they use 220 through 240, and you can see it sometimes referred to as 225. So direct current is current that travels in one direction and is constant, right? And this is what most electronic devices use. So do we see the problem and why we use power supplies? Are we starting to see why we may use them? Yes, Kayla, go ahead, please.
Why does Europe use a higher voltage? And like it says here, like 110, 120 V between in the
they
state.
have a different. They built their infrastructure around that voltage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's how their infrastructure is set up. Well, our infrastructure is set up for 110 to 200.
But is that more efficient, or what's the reason for that exactly?
So I don't know the specific reason to why they did it that way, but it basically means that they're sending more electricity right through the wire. So if you get shocked by 110, it's gonna hurt. But if you get shocked by 220, it's gonna burn you. It's a lot more powerful. Yeah.
DW, can I say something? I know you want the camera. I don't have it. So I noticed. I think the United States electricity is cheaper and it's less dangerous because being that I'm from the southern side of Africa, ours is higher and it costs us more, and there's a lot more accidents. Like when it's raining, there's a what is it? What's the thunder
Electric
and lightning
shorts.
thing?
Yeah.
Yes, it just has a lot of dangers. But since I came here, I don't see as many as I did when I was back where I'm from. So I think this one is cheaper and it's less dangerous in my experience.
I don't know if that might be the case from where you specifically were. It depends on the infrastructure and the safety measures that they put up. I know back home in my country, in the Dominican Republic, they use 220, right? Or they were using 220, and then the country went through. I guess we were lucky because we didn't have that much infrastructure. But then in the 90s and the 2000s, when they started building up all that electrical infrastructure and they started building dams and these power plants, they switched over to 110, and now the electricity is much more consistent and it's easier to manage, and it becomes cheaper too, like you said. I'm not sure if it's because they're using 110 as opposed to 220, or it's just that that they invested in their infrastructure and that way they're able to provide it at a cheaper rate. Also, remember that competition drives down forces. So depending on the market that you're in, if you have one company that controls electricity, right, they are able to control how much they can charge for it, right, as opposed to when you have multiple people competing, right, the prices usually come down, right? So that might also affect those things. Do you still have another question, Kayla? I know I wasn't really able to give you a good answer for that, but I don't have it at this moment.
Oh no, it's okay. I'll just Google it.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
No worries. So I was trying to see if you guys were seeing why alternating current would be bad for our electronic devices and why we need a power supply. Can anyone? We're gonna get to it, but does anyone have an idea of why?
Is it because with because I think it has to use direct.
It has to use direct, yes.
Because it's not so intense, and the way the computer communicates, it kind of calls for the DC.
Exactly, right. So electrical components have a specific need, right? So if they were expecting a certain amount of volts and they're getting a higher, if that current happened to spike, right, it'll fry that, right? And if it happened to be a low, then it's not getting enough, right? It's not getting enough power. So that's why we need to be able to find something to convert the alternating current into direct current, and that's why we have power supplies. That is the main job of our power supply. So let's go on.
Does it have to
the
do with
next
the sorry to interrupt? Does it have to do with the voltage? So like it doesn't come in as a straight 110 or 120. It comes in between that. So because of the DC current, you're changing that into a specific type of voltage. I mean wattage.
So we're gonna go on to the next slide, and because our components don't use that 110, right? They use a lot less than that. So we need to be able to convert it to a direct current, and then while we're converting it, we need to regulate how much of it. So we'll see that how it gets split up coming up. But yes, good job there, Joe. You're right on the money.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's a picture of the power supply. It's this big square up here where all the wires coming out of it. So the power supply, or the PSU, this is the acronym for it. So you see PSU, you know that it's power supply. It's different from UPS, which is an uninterruptible power supply. They're different things. So you need to be able to identify this and know what they're talking about. But it supplies power to all the PC components. It converts AC current to direct current, right? Then we got something about 110 direct currents, 60 hertz, 220 direct currents is at 50 hertz. We have a selector switch. So some power supplies have a switch in the back where you can manually switch that power to supply to switch between 120 and 220. Between 110 and 220, depending where you are in the world. So if you're in the United States, you want that selected to 110, right? Because you're using 110 volts, so you're expecting 110 volts. If you're somewhere where you're expecting 220 volts, you want to switch that to the 220. And then there are other power supplies that do this automatically. And there are labs and test out where you have to pay attention to this, or you won't be able to complete the labs. You won't be able to do what they're asking you. All right, and then the charges. So this is what we were talking about. So the components expect a specific amount of volts, right? So we have positive and negative 3.3, right? Then we have positive and negative 5, right? And then the last one is positive and negative 12. Okay, and these are the amount of volts that are coming through those specific components. And then so the power supply provides a DC current to these different components in these amounts, right? In the positive or negative 3.3, the positive or negative 5, and then in the positive 12. And then
DW.
capacity, yes.
Excuse me, sorry. Is it positive or negative 3.3, or is that just like a point, like a dash? Because you see,
You're
how
right. That's positive 3.3. You're absolutely correct. Positive 3.3, positive and negative 5, and then positive and negative 12. Thank you. Who was that?
That's our
Who was
test
that?
room. That's our test.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay, and I'll get to you guys in 1 second there, guys. I see your hands up. And then, so like we said, the power supply provides the direct current connectors for all its computers. So these connectors are what's supplying the direct current to your parts inside the computer. And then the capacity of the power supply, how much power it can give, is measured in watts. So if you see, there'll be a wattage rating on power supplies, and that's how much total power it can provide. All right, and then we'll go over how to measure that in a second for specific components. All right, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going? Is my audio okay?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Now I was just like, I was doing a lab test out, and then there was a part that we had to turn on, like the power supply, and that's my first time ever doing it on a computer. I wonder if that's like always the case with any computer, because I feel like I haven't used a desktop in so long. So when we're like turning on or installing, putting together a computer, do we have to always switch that in the back of a computer, or?
It might be that it's on. It might be that someone didn't put it on. But the point of that lab is to remind you that switch is there. So the fact that it's not turning on might be that just because that's a switch to the power supply. So it might be that switch is off in the back. So it's kind of the point of the lab is to teach you that power supplies may have that in the back, that power button in the back. So even if you're pressing power on the front panel, because the power switch of the power supply is off, there's no power flowing in.
Yeah, that was like the part that got me stuck, because I've never done that before. So then now when I went back and I fixed it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. So now I know.
It got all of us.
Yeah,
You're not the only one. It got me too. It got Kelly when he went through it. It's yeah.
Cool.
I mean, it's designed that way. It's designed so that way you can be aware of it in the future.
Right.
Donald,
cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that 220 VAC on the top. Is that for in Europe, like European?
Yes.
outlet?
Yes, this is a 220. So it's 220 through 240, right? Because it's alternating, so it'll switch. It'll go up and down, right? So yes, that's what that is.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
All right. Okay. All right. So this is kind of what we were alluding to earlier. I think it was George who brought that up. So the alternating current comes in from the main line into your power supply, right? Then it gets converted into direct current. But still, the components themselves, they need a specific amount, right? So they need either the positive 3.3 the +5, the -5, the +12. So then that gets split inside the power supply, and then it goes out through those wires as a direct current for the appropriate voltage needed for those components. Okay, so it's not like 110 volts are coming in and we're sending 25 volts here, 25 there. No, they get regulated into the specific amounts that those cables need, because all these cables have a specific amount of voltage that flow through them, and so the regulators provide the specific amount for each and every different cable to go to the specific components inside the computer. All right. So this one here shows the 20 pin, which would be for what? What do we use the 20 pin for?
Motherboard power?
The motherboard, so the main power supply, right? So within there, within this 20 pin connector, you have a plus 3.3 volt voltage, you got a +5, you have another +5, and you got a +12. And then these all go into that 20 pin. Right? And that makes that connector. Different connectors will look differently. You don't need to know these specifically, but this is just to give you a picture of what's going on inside. Ramon.
So of a 4-point connector, like that would be the +3.3 volt. That would be in it, or it will be separated the same way as these 4. Like the 3.
It will have different. It will have different regulators in it. Yes, it will. I think we have a slide coming up on it. Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's see what we got coming up. Okay, so this is the dual voltage option. All right, so this is kind of what Steven was talking about. If you haven't gone to the lab, that IO switch is the on and off switch for the power supply. If it's off, that means that it's not accepting any power from the main line, right? And then if it's on, power is flowing through. But then this red switch at the top is called the voltage selector, or the voltage switch. And you're able to switch between 110 and 220, depending on what voltage you're expecting. If you're in the USA, you're expecting 110. If you're somewhere else in the world, you might be expecting 220. So you would switch this appropriately. All right? And this is extremely important, specifically when you're outside of the United States, because if you have it set for 110 and you're getting 220, it's gonna fry your PSU. Right? Now, if you have it set to 220 and you're in the United States, right, and you have it set to 220, what happens is you might have lower performance because it's expecting 220 and it's only getting 110, but it won't fry it. You still should switch it over to the appropriate voltage, right? So that way you get the max out of your unit. Right? And then, like I said earlier, some units have the switch automatically where it just detects what's coming in and is able to switch appropriately. You have to do nothing there. But a lot of them have it in the back. Okay. Are we all clear on what the volt switch does? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay. All right, so this is the power switch. This is what I just spoke about this. It's a physical switch to turn on and off the power supply. And when on, the direct current is able to flow to the motherboard. And when it's off, there's no electrical flow. So when it's on and there's power flowing, when you push the power button on the front panel, when you're powering on your system the traditional way, then the BIOS and the OS take over after that, right? But up to that point, there is soft power going on. So there is a small trickle of power that's going in, and that's what we call soft power. You guys another minute to look over this slide real quick. So here, the red is the voltage switch. This here is the connector where we would connect our power cord too. And then underneath that, we have the on and off switch, the physical switch for it. Okay.
TW, why does
Yes.
it say 230?
Like I said, between 220 and 240.
Okay.
So it could say any number in between that.
Okay.
Same thing for the 110 through 120. Okay.
Got it.
All right, you got it. Okay, so now we get to talk about some of the cables. You guys saw some of these already. So, so the first one is the main power for the motherboard, and it's called the 20 or the 24 pin, also called the P1. Okay, 24 pin is the most common and in modern PCs, and it can be backward compatible, right? So that's why I don't know if you guys remember this, but when we first went over it last week, I told you that usually the 4 extra pins are like detachable, or like you could just split them off, and it's built that way to be backward compatible. So this specific cable provides positive 3.3 volts, positive and negative 5 volts, and positive and negative 12 volts to the motherboard. Okay. Then some motherboards require CPU power, and this power is directly for the CPU, and it can come in 4, 6, or 8 pin connectors. Okay. I know Romeo had a question about the specific voltage that goes to the CPU.
Yeah,
I think it might come. It might come up in another slide. So let's just wait and see. I know that you asked about whether it gets 3.3, the plus and negative 5, or the 12. We can check in a few slides. Let's see what other kind of cables we got. So we have power to peripherals. So the Molex is a 4-pin connector that supplies 5 volts and 12 volts for IDE drives. And you gotta firmly push it in to plug it in properly. And then we have a mini Molex that does the same thing for the 3.5 floppy disk drives. Okay. All right. Now we have our SATA power connectors.
Yo, DW, please.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Just like 3 more seconds on that last slide.
Sure.
We cool.
You good?
I have a quick question, DW.
Yes.
Do you actually really post the slides? Because I've been looking, I don't see them.
Yeah, let me double check that I posted them in the right channel, because sometimes
I keep checking them because I kind of like to, after this, I still study and take notes again. So.
Yeah, they're in there.
Yeah, they're on Slack.
All right. Thank you, guys.
The newest message.
Yeah, they're there.
What's this Slack?
Make sure that you're on the right channel in Slack. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. Are you all set, Artez?
Yeah, we good. I even opened my Slack, so we straight. Thank you.
Got it. All right. So now we got our SATA, right? SATA, like, is for drives. Could be external, internal. Also, this provides 12 volts, and it provides the 3. So it provides all types: the 3.3, the 5, and the 12 volts for the SATA. And it supports SATA hot swappable feature, meaning that you could plug them in while your system is running. When you see something that says hot swappable, that's what it means. You can plug it in and out of your system while the system is running. Okay, and then higher end cards, or the PCI Express cards, like higher end video cards, require dedicated power to run all those extra nice graphics for you. And these can come in 6 or 8 pins. And then this would also will provide all 5. So it would provide 3.3 plus a -5 and a plus a -12. Okay, and I think that's the case also for the first one. If we go back to the CPU, it provides all 3.3, 5, -5, 12, and -12. Romero. Okay, so here we go. Here's the SATA. Okay, this is for your PCI Express, your PCIe. So your video cards, think video cards when you see this. Then we got our IDE drives, our floppy disk drives, and fans. And then here we have our main power and our CPU power. And we're gonna get a lot of practice with this in test out. There's about 3 different power supply labs, and then there's multiple labs where you have to go and find and troubleshoot and build PCs and do other things. So you're gonna have a lot of experience with this. Okay, this I definitely recommend you guys take a picture of, because it's hard to remember these, but it's good to see what they have. So you see here's the 20 pin power connector. It tells you exactly which pin provides what. So pin 1 gives positive 3.3 volt, right? Pin 12 at the bottom gives positive 12 volts, right? So on the left side, you have 1 through 10, then 11 starts on the right side at the top, and then those go 11 through 20. Okay, so this is an ATX 4-pin 12 volt. That's another thing, actually, Romero. So the cables, the connectors themselves will say what power they're connecting written on them usually, and then that will tell you like which component you need to plug it into, because the component will also tell you what kind of power it needs. All right. So here at the bottom we have an ATX 24 pin. Okay. So if you look at it, the first 20 pins are the same, right? If you look here at 1 through 10, and here at 1 through 10, it's the same, right? Up to that point. But because it's 24, the pin numbers after that change. So 11 is no longer at the top. 11 is right after 10, and it's again another positive 12 volts. And then 12 is after that. So then the pin at the top next to 1 would be 13 in this case. You're not going to get questions about this in the exam, about these specific pins, but this will be good to understand, to troubleshoot. Maybe if you get a code that you're not getting negative 12 volts, then you might be able to know that maybe your connector is bad at a certain pin, and you can find a different connector. Not some, but a lot of power supplies allow you to swap in the cables on both ends, so that way if you have a bad cable, you don't have to go get a whole new power supply. If that makes sense. Okay, so were we able to take a picture of this here, guys?
Not yet. 1 second.
Okay.
You said that in the connectors have a label on them specifying.
Some connectors have, they should have labels, yes. So it'll say 12 volt, 4-pin. Yes, it'll say that. Yeah.
But the problem is in the lab test, they don't label them. You just have to figure them out from the shape.
Yes. So like the Molex, you have to figure it out from the shape. Yes. But like I said, they're not going to ask you specifically for the pins, but they will expect you to know that the Molex does provide 12 volts and 5 volts, right? that the ATX provides all types of the volts, the +3, +5, -5, +12, and -12. So we do need to know what kind of power is supplied through the type of cables, right? And then based on the shape of them, you should be able to identify them as well. But in real life, yeah, the cables will have labels on them. So, okay, were we able to take a picture of this?
Yep.
Yep. All right, so now we get to talk about form factor. So power supplies come in different form factors, and like we've learned with motherboards, form factors describes the size or shape of a component, and it's the same thing with power supplies. So standard ATX is 150 millimeters by 140 millimeters by a depth of 86 millimeters, and that's for a desktop power supply unit. Okay, and then this provides the P1 connector along with the Molex, SATA, and other required cables to the motherboard. And then the mini ATX and micro ATX are smaller in size and are designed specifically to work for those cases and motherboards. Okay. You're not required to know the dimensions of the power supplies, but they might ask you what form factor would you use in this for this build. And you should know you can use the standard or a mini ATX or a micro ATX to go along with it. When talking about power supplies, probably the most important thing they're going to ask you about is wattage. All right, we're not at wattage yet. But so this is rails. Generally, power supplies split the current into 12 volts, plus or minus 5 volts, and 3.3 volts. So each rail, which is each cable, has a maximum amount of power it can supply. And then powerful computers with advanced CPUs and video cards require more power than some rails can provide. So this is why they have the extra cables, like the extra CPU power or the extra PCIe power. So that's why you have those connectors, right, to provide those extra power to those components. So there's multiple 12-volt rails with over power protection to allow for balanced circuitry and to supply the required power. So this is basically saying that you have multiple 12-volt rails, right? And this gives you a balanced circuitry, and it requires the power, and it gives you the power required for the components. And then today's power supply manufacturers produce single and multi-rail PSUs, and that just means that you're getting that some power supply manufacturers give you just the one rail, while others can give you multiple rails. So it's important to read your documentation and to identify what components you're trying to run, so that way you can determine whether you need the extra rails or not. All right. The widths. Can you tell me one of the voltages that's provided by the power supply? You can type it in chat if you can't speak to it. Did he disconnect? Did they disconnect? All right. How about Rena? Can you tell me one of the voltages that the power supply unit provides?
Yes. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. You say the voltage?
Yeah, one of the different types of voltages that the power supply unit provides.
I think it is 120 and 140.
Okay, that's the current that comes in But I'm talking about the one once it's split and it goes out to the different components. There's 5 different ones. Can you tell me
Oh.
one? Do you know one of them?
No, just yeah.
Okay.
I was not. Okay, sorry.
No worries. Okay, Ian is volunteering. Go ahead, Ian. Give me one.
Is it 115 voltage?
No. So that's what's coming in, right? That's the AC
12?
current that's coming into to the power supply. Now it's been converted to DC current, and now we want to regulate it to the currents that the different components need. Francis.
5.
5. Which one? Positive or
Volts.
negative?
Positive.
Okay, so Francis gave me 1. Bubakar, let me get another one.
12 volts.
Positive or negative?
Positive.
So far we got positive 5 and positive 12. Donald.
Positive 3.3.
Positive 3.3. Madison.
Negative 3.3.
So negative 3.3 is not one of them. That
No?
was a so it's positive. So far we got positive 3.3, positive 12, positive 5. Nassim?
Negative 12.
Negative 12. So we got 4. You want to try again, Madison?
I'm going off my slide. That's
All
what
right.
I see.
Yeah, it's confusing because there's a dash at the beginning of it, but it's not negative. It's just
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Okay.
So
thank
far
you
we
for
got
that.
positive 12, positive 3, positive 5, negative 12. We're missing 1. Which one are we missing, Madison?
Negative 5?
Negative 5. So those are the 5 different volts that the power supply is applying to the units, right? Okay. But so those of you guys who said 220 and 110, that's the current that's coming in, right? That's the AC current that's coming into your power supply, and the power supply is converting that into direct current for the different components. And those direct currents are in the voltages of negative 12, positive 12, negative 5, positive 5, and positive 3.3. Do you still have a question, Donald, or you just have your hand up still? All right, Madison, you have another question? Okay, cool. All right, so now we're talking about wattage. So this is probably, so the volts, you need to know what kind of volts are provided, right? Like that's definitely going to be a possible question. So knowing those 5 different volts is very important. And then you're definitely going to see questions about wattage. And wattage is how much power a unit can provide. Okay, and those come with a wattage rating of 500 watts or 850 watts or 100 watts. All right, this is listed in when you're going to buy it. One is listed in the box as one of its major features, right? That with probably also the amount of connectors and what kind of connectors and its size. Those are probably the 3 most important things you got to pay attention to: is form factor, the load, the wattage rating, right? And then the type of wires that come in it, right? Because if you know you're gonna run 2 PCIe cards that both require 8-pin power connectors, then you need to look for a power supply that allows you to power those cards, right? It makes no sense to buy a power supply without those connectors, because then you're not gonna be able to power those cards. So you need to read. You need to know what you need to power inside of your system, and then you have to be able to pick the right power supply after that. So we have a specific rule, basically, because each component has a amount of wattage that it needs, right? So what you do is you take all the components that you plan on using and you add them up, right? This is going to give you the total watts that you need, the bare minimum power that you need, right? And then you go above All right. So for the test, it's 30%. In real life, I would say 50%. So you go above that because guess what, guys? We like making upgrades. We like adding new things. Today, you might have a CPU that only requires 100 watts, right? But then next year, you want to update that PCU and now it needs 200 watts. So you want to have the flexibility for upgrades. So that's why when you're building a system, you try to give yourself some buffer between what you have now and what you absolutely need now to what you may need in the future. Ninja, you have a question?
Yes. So so the three main thing is form factor, wattage rating, and wiring. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Those are the
Repeat it one more time, Ninja. Repeat that for me one more time, Ninja.
form factor. So the size of the PCU, right? Because depending on your case, you need to be able to select something that's going to fit in there.
Okay.
Right. Then the wattage, right? This is gonna how much power you're actually able to provide. So your wattage rating, and then your connectors, your wires, because you need to have the right amount of connectors and the right type.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and then this last bullet point, it makes a good point. Video cards draw the most power in the system from the 12-volt output. So, I mean, a lot of my guys who are gamers out there know that your video card uses the most power. You have a high-end video card that uses the most power. It also heats up the fastest. So, things to keep in mind.
Mine has very cool lights on it.
Your video card, nice. Or your power supply, or everything.
The video card, power supply.
Right. Okay, so determining wattage capacity. This is kind of what I was talking about. So you consider all your components inside the case, including your USB and FireWire devices. So if you have devices that get connected to your USB, you consider those as well. So then you add all the wattage for those components, right? And then once you have that total, you add 30% to that. This is for the test. In real life, I think you need to go above that, but minimum 30% above, right? You should purchase quality power supply units that are warranted, that have a warranty rating, and that have their total wattage calculated, because it'll make life easier for you. Ramon.
Okay, you see how it says like 200 to 300? You would use the max amount, right? When you're doing the calculation.
If you don't have a sure value for it, yeah, then you round up. Yes, I would suggest that. Yeah. But if in a test they'll give you definites. They'll be like, you have this, your components are a total of 500 watts. Which power supply should you buy? 600, 650, and they'll give you some choices, and just do the math and figure out which one it is.
So how do you add up your
So you see this example that's on here?
Yeah, I see.
All right, somebody do me a favor and take out their calculator app real quick. Where's my calculator?
Oh, you just wanted somebody to be like. Oh,
so Nassim has an 845. All right, Nassim, what is 30% of 845?
Math.
845 times 0.3. All right, so you take 253.3 and add it to 845, and that should be how much wattage the power supply unit that you want to buy.
About 1100.
Exactly. So you would look for something with 1100 or a little bit above. You might need 1100, right? That might be the 30%, right? That you need, but the power supply unit might only come in 1200, right? So then you would go to 1200.
Right.
Right? Okay. For anyone who doesn't understand how we got that, we added all these numbers here in the chart. We added them together, the higher numbers. So instead of 200, we took 300. Instead of 15, we took 30. We just took the high end. We added those. That gave us 845. Then we took 30% of 845, which is the 253, and then you add those two numbers together, 845 and 253, and that gives you the wattage that you should get for that power supply unit. All right, here we go. All right, Steven, go ahead.
Sorry. So I got 835 for adding, and then what we're supposed to do afterwards? Sorry.
So you get 30% and add it. And then so there's two ways you could do it. You can multiply that number by 0.3 and then add what you get to the 835, or you can multiply that number by 1.3 and that'll just give you the answer straightforward. So multiply 845 times 1.3. What do you get?
1,000. Oh no. Whoa. Times 1.3. 1,098.50 cents. Oh, 50.
Right, almost 1,100, just like Nassim said. Yes.
So that's
right. That's just a quick way to do your percentage while adding it to the total.
Okay.
Okay, but the concept here is that for CompTIA, they want you to add 30% to the minimum that you need for your system to run. Right? You want to give yourself a buffer for upgrades, for just adding components. You want to give yourself that flexibility. Ninja.
So in other words, you can you will never go wrong by having more wattage availability than lower, right?
So
Less.
here's what I would say about that. You don't want to go too crazy above. Why? Because that extra wattage comes at a cost. You're using more power. All right. So you want, like if you need let's say you need 1,000 watts, don't go buy a 10,000 watt PSU, right? It's just, it's too much. But definitely giving yourself a buffer, at least 30%, especially in the exam, you definitely do need to do that. And in real life, I would suggest 50 or a little bit higher than that, just to give yourself room for upgrades.
Are we allowed to use a calculator?
Did that
during
answer
the
your
exam?
question, Ninja? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, it did. Basically, but if it wasn't a concern, because you have so much room for error, right? Because if you get less than what you would need, then it's a worse problem than having.
Yeah, but then also remember that as your wattage goes up, so does the size of the unit as well. So those are other things to take into, and so does cost as well. It might be budget. You might have budget restraints. So you try to do the best that you can with all these factors coming in. You understand? All right.
Yes.
Adriel and then Crystal.
Yeah, I was gonna.
A little bit.
Oh, sorry. For the most part, some of the power supplies are already like they have a certain type of rating, like the silver, platinum, gold rating, stuff like that, and it's a rating of efficiency. So even when you're getting something that's let's say it's 500 watts, if it has like an 80+ gold standard, it can say like, oh, it goes up to 80% efficiency. So even if you're buying 500, it should be just a little bit under. So you're not buying the power supply like Ninja was saying. You're not buying the power supply at what you want. You're buying it for more than what you would need, but not so much more that you're planning on having the same PC for the next 12 years, Yeah. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but
that's definitely what we're talking about. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Crystal?
Good morning, DW, and good morning, everyone. Thank you. Ninjin, were you asking, like, if you get a 10,000 watt thing and you only need 1,000, could it be problematic? Is that what you were asking?
No, I mean.
No, he
but
was
so-
asking if more is always better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
He's like, you can't go wrong with more.
right. Okay.
And-
So, but with that being said, couldn't it cause your PC to overheat or like fuse to blow or something like that?
No, because remember, the power supply is still splitting up that power that's coming in into the appropriate things, right? When you have this extra wattage, it means that there's probably a extra connectors in there for like multiple components, right?
Okay.
And also that but it's not giving a specific component more power than it needs, because that component is only going to be able to draw the power that it needs, right? Like it's not going to be able to go and ask for more power that's just not there. So that wouldn't be a issue, Crystal. The main issue with getting too much is waste. There is a point where it's just waste, right? It's the same thing. Like if you're hungry, right, and if you're hungry and you know that you're not sure how much you're gonna eat, so you get 2 slices, right? That's probably okay, right? Because if you get to a slice and a half, that's fine. But if you order a whole pie, you have an extra 6 slices that that is kind of being wasted there. So my point to you guys is, too much is a problem when it becomes wasteful. But up to a certain point, we actually want extra. We want extra up to a certain point, right? Okay, let's see what else we have over here. I think we have problems with people. Okay, all right. Let's see if we recognize some of these connectors. Crystal, why don't you tell me number 5? You're muted, hon. You're muted. That's all right.
Sorry. So what kind of connector it is, you mean?
Yeah, what do we call this connector right here, this big one?
Can I phone a friend?
How about we try? Let's count the pins.
Okay.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
20.
7, 8, 9, 10. Right. You have 20, right? 10 times 2 is 20.
Right.
So this is a 20-pin connector.
It's not a PCI, is it?
No, it's not the PCI. It's the main power connector, also called the P1.
P1. Okay.
Yeah, but if you tell me 20-pin connector, that's also true.
Okay.
Okay.
And isn't that often like isn't that always the biggest one to like make it
right?
easy?
That's the biggest one for the motherboard, right? This goes into the main connection for the motherboard. It could also have an extra 4 pins because remember it could be 20 pin or 20 plus 4. So there could be a little attachment here with an extra 4 pins. Go ahead, Ramon.
I was gonna like go for 1 or 3.
Okay, give me 3. What do you think 3 is?
Between 1 and 3, I think it's the Mox cell. Am I saying it right?
Say it again. The Molex?
Starts with the M. It starts with M.
The Molex.
Yes, Molex. That.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like a Molex.
But would it? Because I can't really see underneath it, because the Molex is kind of close to a D type. So
yeah. So I would say that 1. I think 1 is the Molex. 3 kind of looks like something else, just because it's kind of, if you see this little divider here, it's like splits to 2 pins, right? Can you think of another peripheral that might only use 2 pins at a time? That uses little power? We have multiple of these in our systems, and is used for cooling. Fans, yes. So this will be like the fan connector. It's also a 4-pin thing. So you're not wrong, Romero. You're not wrong there. But traditionally, this Molex here is what we would call this is what we call the Molex, and this is like the fan power here. Okay. What about this little one over here? Does anyone know what this one is? Number 4.
CPU.
Go ahead, Kayla.
I believe that's for the floppy disks.
Yeah, what do we call it?
Oh,
It looks like this one, but it's smaller.
IDE.
It looks like this one here.
The mini
it's smaller.
Molex?
The mini
IDE.
Molex. Yeah, we do use it for the. So we use the Molex for the IDE, and then we use the mini for the 3.5 and the floppy. But it's also a Molex. It's called a mini Molex. All right. What about this one here, number 2? What does this look like?
Is that the PCI Express?
Yeah, CPU maybe.
It's for the CPU power.
I think this is the CPU power. Yeah, this is the CPU power. Yeah, good job there. I can see why you thought it could have been the PCI as well. They're kind of blocky. I don't think we have a PCI one on this slide. What about this one here? This one at the end.
SATA.
SATA. Yeah, SATA.
Yeah, the SATA connector.
Good job. Yeah. All right. You guys are becoming power supply experts right before my eyes. Okay. All right, so let's look at them. So 4-pin or the Molex, that we got that. 4-pin power supply. This is for the CPU. It doesn't say it here, but yeah, that's what it is. We got the 6-pin power cable. Okay, so I was wrong about this. This was a 6-pin. We should have counted the wires. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this would be, I guess, for the PCIe 6-pin. Okay. We got the floppy drive or the cable, power cable. Kayla was absolutely right about that. Crystal was right about the 20-pin power, and then the same with the SATA at the end. You want to take a picture of this, guys. This one was a little rough because we couldn't see it, but I should have counted the wires. That's also, if you can't see the pins at the bottom, each pin goes to a wire. That's something to remember.
Because I was gonna say, I don't think most things take, aside from a fan, most things don't take 2 pins.
Yeah, that's
right?
why I was saying that it might have been the thing is with the fans. Remember that like let's say it takes 2 or 3, you can always just slide them over.
Yeah.
You could and it'll just. I think Adrian was the one who pointed it out last week. Like if your fan has different speeds, but you only have two pins in it, then it's just on or off. You won't be able to switch the speeds. That was you, right, Adrian? Was that last week?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I got confused, Kayla. See, we all make mistakes. All right. Are you guys able to take a picture of this? All right. Everyone's favorite match time.
Can I put the link, please? GW, sorry.
Hold on. How do I get it from here, Kelly?
Upper center. There you go.
Got it. Thank you.
Oof. Need another water bottle. I'm already done. Did I say another water? A bottle? Another bottle of water.
Been listening to Yoda too long.
What's that?
Been listening to Yoda too long.
I guess. Even Yoda wouldn't have said it like that, though. How come it's not showing me their progress? Oh, I gotta go to teacher. Whoops. There you go. If I read, I will figure it out. Okay, here we guys another piece open and all that. Once the power supply is off, the switch is off, and you've unplugged the cable from the back, then you can start taking away the supply lines from the different components, right? You start taking it away from the motherboard, the drives, the cards, the CPU, the fans. You make sure everything is off. Once all those cables are unplugged, you start unscrewing the power supply from the case, all right? So to install it, the first thing you would do is insert the power supply into the case, right, into its slot. Then you screw in those screws, make sure that it's tight. Then you plug in all the supply lines to where they need to go, the motherboard, the CPU, the GPU, the fans, all those things, make sure that it's on, right? Then the last thing you do is plug in the power cord to the back. You turn on the power supply switch. You make sure that it's on for the appropriate voltage, and then you turn it on, and then you turn on your computer, and hopefully everything works well. Okay. Thank you for reading that for us, Chris. Do we have any questions about these steps? Okay.
EW, they might be wondering if there was something they could do to practice this.
No, there's absolutely no way to practice it other than doing it in real life. No, I'm kidding. Test out. What do I do here? Just hit continue, Kyle?
Yeah, hit continue.
All right. So you guys got to join. Put in the link in case anyone's not in it for any reason. Ooh. And in case you guys are wondering if there's a Kahoot for power supplies, there is. It will be around maybe next week. So more practice for you guys. Brianna, I thought you were the gamer chick, man. You like the games. Come on.
It was okay today.
It was okay today.
Yeah, but you never you never know. You be trapping, DW.
I be trapping.
You trap us sometimes.
I be camping. I set up a camp with my trick questions, waiting for you guys. All right, we got 23 people. Let's get it started. Why is it doing that?
It sounds like there's an echo.
Is that me?
Yeah, you have to mute it from you being there.
How can it be me? It's not playing on my speakers. Hold on. Let's see if it's true. you guys hear me? No one take my comments. All right. Let's
Sometimes I really wish you can change your answer. Like if you misclick something, you're like,
Oh no.
you're
Making me do
basically
it again.
stuck. Oh,
Yeah,
It just
because
ups the
because
stakes.
it's time based, like it takes your first issues. It takes your first response as your locks it in. All right. So, what do you think are the symptoms of a power supply issue? Go ahead, Rena.
If the computer won't turn on, or if the computer has like a beeping sound.
Yeah, those are two of the symptoms. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
Can a symptom be if you smell like something burning, like a light burning
Yeah.
smell?
Yeah, for sure. You smell
So
something
what are the
burning.
symptoms of
be
a
it.
power supply issue?
What was that? I didn't hear that last bit. I got to put my sound back up because you guys made me bring it down. Go ahead, say it again. Say that last bit again.
No, me.
Yeah, someone said if it doesn't turn on, then someone else said a smell, a burning smell.
I think Rena had said it like the symptoms of a power supply issue specifically. That's what she.
Yeah,
she
well,
was just being
if your
specific.
power supply fries out, you'll get a burning smell for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Does anyone know how we can confirm power supply issues? What we can do? What's one method?
Use
Just
a tester.
a PSU tester is one way. Perfect. What about another method? This is kind of a method for like almost any component that you think might be having an issue. Was a surefire method to figure out.
Use a good spare.
Yeah, use something that you know is working, right? So if you have a good spare around, swap that out, and if your system works good with that, then you know that the one that you were troubleshooting is probably faulty. Okay. Steps to replace a power supply. So who can help me out with that?
First, you have to turn off the power supply switch and unplug the AC.
Right, you got to turn it off and unplug it. That's step one. Thank you. Step two.
Remove the wires from the computer case.
For the motherboard, you remove all those wires inside, right?
Then you unscrew it.
Okay, you unscrewing is part of was part of one, right?
Don't you unscrew it from the case? That's like
No, sorry. Then you unscrew it. Yeah, unscrewing is the last thing. Yes, you're right. Sorry about that. All right, so now we got the power supply out. What's next?
Relax.
Reinstall a new power supply.
Install a new power supply. Okay, how do we do that?
Put it into the case.
Is there something I should be doing before I'm putting it in? You're not wrong about the step to actually putting back in, but is there something I should be doing before?
Making sure it's compatible.
Thank you. Right? Yeah, you got to figure out what you need. You probably should check the wattage of your old power supply, right? Make sure that the one that you got now is working for that. But let's say we did that. All right, awesome. So yes, now you're putting it back in the case. That's step one. What's step two?
Screw it in.
Say that again.
Screwing the power supply into the case.
Once it's in the case and screwed in, yes, that those two. Remember, there was 3 steps, so we're gonna put those 2 together into one step. What's next after that?
Connecting the wires to the motherboard.
The wires where inside?
To the motherboard.
Yes, so that's step 2. What's the last step?
Turn it on and pray.
Okay, you turned it on. It's not turning on. Why is it not turning on?
Because you didn't plug in the AC power.
You got to plug in the AC power to the back and make sure that is on. There you go. Good job, guys. Oh, man, you guys are ready to install power supplies. All right, so troubleshooting a power supply. Power supplies fail in 2 ways: sudden death and slowly over time. So they can crap out right on the spot, or you can have little symptoms like you're not getting enough power, things dimming in and out.
Your hope is the first one.
Exactly. With sudden death, the computer won't start and the fan in the power supply will not turn on. Verify that electricity is getting into the PSU before doing anything. So before you take everything out, make sure it's plugged in. And remember, wires have 2 ends. Make sure it's plugged into the wall and make sure the other end is plugged into the back of your computer, right? While you're back there, it's probably a good idea to make sure that that switch is flipped on too, right? If you're in the USA and you have a voltage, you have a voltage switch in the back, maybe you have a kid, maybe someone, I don't know, maybe someone's back there messing around, they flip that voltage switch to 220, you're not getting enough power for it to turn on. So just have, just make sure, check all the obvious things before you start taking stuff apart, right? Especially when you're at work, because time, we've heard this, but time is money, right? And if you were doing something that took you 2 hours and you could have done it in 3 minutes, that's a lot of wasted time. Francis, what's up?
The most comical one of them all is when it's literally just the power button on the case that breaks. I don't know that at all from experience.
You it's happened to you. I'm sorry. Hey, I've had the other one. Like this was way before any of this. I was probably in I want to say I was in high school, but I was the de facto technician in the house, right? Because A, I'm the one who uses everything, and B, I'm the only one who cares about it. So my PC just stopped turning on, and I'm like, yo, it's plugged into the wall. I'm like, I'm going crazy. I'm like, my parents aren't gonna buy me a new one. I'm just like, and then I'm like, and I don't know what told me, but I'm like, look at the back of it, and sure enough, the power cord was unplugged. Plug that sucker in. Hallelujah, baby! I got power. I could get back on AIM. I could go back to chatting. That's what was in back in those days. It wasn't
It
anything
happens all the
productive.
time.
Oh
They
my God.
Tell you
unplug
that.
something all the time.
Yeah, so it might have been that my sister was messing around back there. It could have been that my mom was cleaning cases that the cord was just unplugged, and all I needed to do was plug it back in. I was panicking for no reason. All right. When power supplies die slowly, when one of their internal electronics begin to fail, and then the failures are always intermittent and tend to cause some of the most difficult problems to diagnose in PC repair. So when those things happen and something's happening inside internally, we ship those power
Yeah.
supplies out.
Because
and
we want to
get-
like sit and chill, right? We don't want to like rush.
So when those kind of failures happen, and we finally do diagnose that is a power supply unit, it's power supplies are what we call field swappable units, meaning that if it failed, it went bad, all you have to do is write it up, put the report in, and then get a new one and just replace it. We don't do actual work on the power supplies themselves. All right. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our power supply T session. By now, we should be able to identify the characteristics of power supplies and its connectors. We should also be able to select a power supply based on given specifications. We should be able to describe how to remove and install a power supply. And we should be able to identify common problems that come up with power supplies and how to address them. All right. Before I give it back to Kelly, let's just check for understanding here, and let's say that you have been asked to design a system that uses 1,000 watts, right? Requires 1,000 watts of power. What kind of rating for wattage should you get for your power supply? You type it in chat.
1,200.
Why 1,200?
1,300.
Okay, why
Because
1,300?
It's not too.
30% more.
30% more, right, for the exam. If you're being practical in real life, what would you aim for?
15.
1,500. Good. All right. So yeah, 30% is the minimum, right? So it will be 1,300. Okay. What if it was a 500? If your what you needed for watts was 500, how much should your power supply unit provide? What's the minimum you should look for? 650. Good job, Madison. Okay. All right. True or false? A power supply takes in direct current and switches it to alternating current. True or false? Okay.
False.
This is false, right? What does it do? Who can correctly say that statement? What comes in?
It's the opposite. It's AC to DC.
And AC stands for?
Alternating.
Alternating, yeah.
Alternating
Current.
climate, alternating
Current,
change,
current.
alternating current. And DC stands for?
Direct current.
Direct current. Good job. Great. Okay. The first step in removing a power supply is unscrewing it from the case. True or false?
False.
Right. What step is that? Is that the middle step, the last step, or the first step? Okay.
That's the.
It would be the last.
Last step, yep.
The last step.
Okay. All right. Form factor does not matter when selecting a power supply. True or false?
False.
False.
Okay. Different power supplies come with different connectors. True or false? True. It's true.
Yeah.
Depending, these are some of the characteristics you want to look for when you're buying a power supply, because depending on the type of connections that you need, you might look for a power supply that has multiple different kinds of connectors. There's also a term that I didn't see on here. I thought it was on here, but they're called module power supplies, and basically it allows you to swap the cables and just so the power supply itself will be modulated, meaning that it'll have multiple slots for different kind of cables, and you can just pick the cables that you need to plug in as you go. So if you need multiple PCIe's, 8-pin power cables, then you can plug those in and have that available to you. And
That's called like a
big.
wire harness, right? Wiring harness.
I think a wire harness is what holds them together, if I'm not mistaken. Am I?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to compare it to like cars, like a wiring harness would be like all the wires.
You lost
together.
me in cars, man. The only thing I know about cars is nothing. I know nothing about cars.
But
That's
yeah,
Kelly. Kelly
it looks like
can
the
like
bundle
fix
of
anything.
wires like all together. And I was just like, that's just for me, you know.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with y'all understanding of the subject. So good job, guys. I hope you guys found it fun and you learned something new. So Kelly's eager